In Area 12, we have the Wellspring of Answers. So the lowdown on this location is that a while ago, of course when the city was around, a cabal of mages got together and said, you know what, we're going to unify our consciousness together and it's going to be a good time. Unfortunately for them, things didn't turn out too well, and when they merged together, they became this weird monster, an amalgamation of this creepy thing, and this creature now resides at the bottom of this well. Now, when your players get here, really nothing's going to be too out of place. All they're going to see is this giant stone well, and they'll see a whole bunch of benches located around. And actually, located on the side here, it does state that there's a short obituary, and it states that herein lies the immortal remains of the telepathic pentacle. Sit, meditate, and learn. If anybody decides to go ahead and sit down on one of these benches, they can go ahead and try to meditate and try and glean a bit of information about the city. A creature that sits on the bench can, after 1 minute of meditation, gain 1 clue from the Ythryn lore table by successfully making a DC 15 insight check. However, if the check fails by 5 or more, then it is going to disturb the creature in the well. Another way the creature in the well can be disturbed is if a loud noise is able to generate 80 feet down into the well. Which, knowing dumb players, they see a well and they say, I throw a rock in there. You know, someone's always going to do that, right? So, whatever the case may be, whether they generate some noise, they throw something down there, or someone tries to meditate and fails horribly, then the beast is going to awaken. So in regards to the meditation, if your player actually succeeds on this DC 15 insight check, you should go ahead and show these mental images of what the city used to be like. Not just telling them, oh, you know, there was this thing here, go ahead and read this little 2 sentences. No, you should probably go into a little bit more detail about how their senses attune themselves to the world that this place used to be and how they start seeing the everyday common life that was around here. And whatever piece of lore that they get more of a first-hand approach as to how they would learn that piece of information. Now, in regards of this monster uses the stats of a Hydra, except for the following changes: that it has a climbing speed of 30 feet. It is currently in a 100 feet deep well, meaning that if it used its action to dash, it would be able to climb up 60 feet, meaning that after 2 turns, it would make its way up to the players. If your players have dropped a rock in there and they see whatever is down there, or if they are able to, you know, just see in the darkness that far away, then they'll be able to see this horrifying monstrosity. Mind you, you shouldn't use the art of a Hydra because that's just silly. I would go ahead and do some Google Foo and find some hideous, disgusting creature. Hopefully by the time everyone starts getting to this location, then there'll be some excellent art waiting for there to be. Because this thing should look unnatural. This thing should look absolutely creepy and terrifying. It should look like a mix between a Hydra and a gibbering mouther with a whole bunch of weird mouths and eyes and just creepy stuff all over the place. In Area 13, we have the Bazaar of the Bazaar. You know, double entendre there. Your players, when they make their way through here, they'll be able to hear a little bit of a ruckus. And the reason for that is because there is an iron golem that is running around this joint. The thing is, though, is that your players might have already encountered the head of this iron golem, because when your players come here, they'll find the body of this iron golem. Now, this golem will go ahead and defend itself. If your players go ahead and try and attack it, it will attack. But the headless iron golem is not as powerful as it should be. It, being headless, has disadvantage on all attack rolls, and most important of all here is it does not have its poison breath, which is really scary. That's one of the reasons why iron golems are so deadly, is that they can do this crazy poison breath. So it doesn't have either of these attacks, which is really good. It still has a plus 13 to hit, mind you, so even with disadvantage, it's still more than likely going to hit people. And when it hits people, it's going to do a tremendous amount of damage. But hopefully you should go ahead and say, hey, this thing's headless and is flailing around, and hopefully your players don't bother going near it at all. Now, there's 2 important things to note about this location. One is the fact that your players could have tried to befriend the head of the Iron Golem and try to build a great rapport and friendship with it. Heck, maybe for some strange reason they actually dragged the head all the way here and reunited it with its body. What do you do in that case? Well, if your players have this relationship with this Iron Golem, I would just go ahead and just say, let them have it. They have a friend right here, but the Iron Golem doesn't move away from the Bazaar. And what that allows you to do is, if your players are getting into fights all around the city, they could go ahead and try and run all the way back to the Bazaar, and then an Iron Golem is going to help lay the smackdown on whoever is hitting them. That could be a really nice incentive there. That could really lead to an epic climactic fight, and we'll be getting into all of the crazy boss fight shenanigans you can get to later on. But the second thing I want to talk about is the bazaar itself. So this bazaar was apparently home to many awesome artifacts and relics and magical items and whatever the frick else. This place used to be the hub of so much trade, and yet there's not a single bit of treasure here. Go ahead and, if your players explore around, go ahead and roll on that horde treasure table. Go ahead and give them something here, because there being literally nothing to find at all, especially because this place hasn't been looted for the most part, that sucks. Go ahead and give them something at least. In Area 14, we have the Hall of Silk. So the Netherese mages were like most mages, I presume, and they are all about fashion and being, lathered in wealth and fame and whatever else. So one of the ways that the Netherese did it is they had this Hall of Silk. It is this luxurious tailor where when they walk in, they'll be able to see that there are phase spiders. But these phase spiders don't attack anyone. These phase spiders simply quilt this magnificent robe tailored specifically to you. When your players approach, they will see that there are 6 Demos mages that are simply just standing in front of there and guarding the place. They're not going to attack anyone, but they are just going to go ahead and make sure that no one tries to steal anything, because presumably the things inside of this store are worth quite a lot. Inside the store are 5 more Galvan mages, which watch over the merchandise, and inside are located 4 phase spiders, which are just simply sitting there waiting to tailor an awesome robe. In the center of this room is a pedestal, and if anybody goes ahead and steps onto the pedestal, a mage is going to appear. It's going to expout that, welcome to the store, and let's go ahead and get you suited up. And once then, these phase spiders are going to come crawling down, and they're going to start taking measurements, and then they're going to spend the next 10 minutes quilting this beautiful design, whatever it is that they want to do. And this is awesome because your players are, one, going to interact with monsters that normally just try and kill them. So you can have that fun little side of your players are about to get jumped by these spiders, but these spiders go ahead and start busting out some measuring tapes and start looking at all this stuff. I think that's pretty cute. And then they spend 10 minutes and these phase spiders spin this beautiful thing. And once done, your player has this magnificent robe, which doesn't do anything, but it just looks cool and is worth quite a lot of gold. Each person can go ahead and do this, and they can gain this benefit one time, and then they'll have an awesome robe. If people are greedy, though, they can go ahead and look around, and they can see that there is 10 other silks located all around. The thing is, though, if your players go ahead and try and steal some stuff here, then the Magen are definitely going to come in and put a stop to it. And like I mentioned before, you should definitely have it where the Magen are staring at the party, and if anybody tries to touch anything, they simply just shake their head no. And if anyone does it, then they definitely go to, stop whatever they're doing. In Area 15, we have the Observatory. There's 2 reasons why your players might come here. One, because they just want to explore around and see this place looks cool, and they're going to go ahead and try. Or 2, they know for a fact that the inscription that they need to find is located in here, and thus they need to make their way in here. Only problem is, outside are 3 Galvan Mage, 3 Demos Mage, and 1 Hypnos Magen. And these Magen are stopping anybody from making their way inside. What's nice is the fact that there is the Hypnos Magen, which can telepathically speak to people, and this Hypnos Magen can just telepathically say, hey, this place is off limits, you're not allowed inside. This is once again another area where I would have loved to seen how to roleplay out Magen, because what happens if your players try and come up with some elaborate scheme, or they try to negotiate with the Magen, or they try and defy the Magen, they try to trick the Magen. There's a lot of things to consider with interacting with these weird entities, these constructs that look like people, but we don't get anything in regards with that. Your players need to make their way inside this location, and as written, it seems like it's guaranteed to be a fight with all these Magen, which is quite frankly could be a terrible time because your players are spending resources and getting jacked up. So I would recommend that if you have players that are creative, reward that creativity. If they try and generate some noise that draws away a whole bunch of Magen and try and sneak inside, let them have it. If they have some type of authority, whether they're wearing those silk robes and walk up and say, hey, we belong in that observatory, and have a deception check, and they want to make their way inside, go for it. Allow for creativity, because without that creativity, it's just a bland, boring fight out in the middle of the area. Another thing to consider is the Magen could be here simply for the purposes of saying, hey, it's not that we're letting you in, it's that we're not allowing something to get out. And it could be as cryptic as that. That could be fun. You know, your players want to make their way inside, and then these people are standing outside saying, oh no, we're guarding this place for you, not from you. I think that could be entertaining. So why are these Magen possibly telling the players to not come in here? It's because there are Slad inside, and my oh my, can Slad certainly be devastating. It states that there's an iron door that needs to be busted down in order to make your way inside. It has an AC of 19 and 30 hit points, immunity to poison and psychic damage. Once your players make their way inside, a blue Slad is just going to jump out and attack the party. Now, Slad are one of those creatures that you don't see too often in 5th edition modules, and the reason for that is because they are quite frankly disgusting. Their claw attacks have the ability to make you take this disease called Chaos Phage, and what that does is you can no longer regain hit points, and your hit point maximum is reduced. And that is huge. You're going to die if you don't make this save. It sucks. So more than likely, this thing isn't going to be able to kill someone during this fight. No, that's not really what Slad do. This thing is just going to go ahead and attack for a little bit, get itself killed, and then it's probably going to kill people later on because they've been so weakened by this terrible monstrosity. After dealing with this horrible Slad, your players can go ahead and make their way inside of the tower. And once they get to the very top, they'll see this giant telescope, and that is, of course, where that awesome art comes in of a Slad that is peering over this telescope with these tiny little spectacles. Now, your players just got into a fight with this one Slad, and presumably some people got jacked up. Maybe if your players were clever and busted down the door, then they had the Magen deal with that Slad, or at least helped out in the fight, whatever the case may be. They deal with one Slad, and then they immediately go up and see another Slad. They're probably going to be pretty combative. So the way to try and amend this situation is to ensure that this Slad is not giving off any hostile intent whatsoever. Go ahead and just make it so that the Slad turns around, looks at the party, and just doesn't do anything, and just turns around and, you know, is looking peaceful. Maybe it's mumbling to itself and speaking aloud, and maybe it even says, don't mind the mess, and doesn't really pay too much attention to the players. You have to make your players disarming of this Slad, because you probably don't want your players just coming in here and murder hoboing the place. So who is this green Slad, and what is this telescope? The green Slad was the arch astronomer, who was, of course, in charge of this whole thing. The arch astronomer was infected by the Chaos Phage and eventually transformed into this Slad that they are today. However, they are not like most Slad. They're not rampaging and blood hungry and going to try and murder you. No, this arch astronomer is trying to keep it on the real. Now, what is this telescope? This telescope is actually pretty cool. This telescope would allow people to go ahead and look through the stars, and basically the nerdy stuff here is that in the D&D world, there's other pockets of worlds inside these spheres, and these spheres have their own worlds tucked away inside them, and you are actually in one of those spheres. So this telescope allows you to look at one of those other spheres and grab an object and drag it all the way here. And this is what the Necromancy would do. They would go ahead and grab objects or peoples and teleport them here and study on them. But when the crash happened, this thing became so terribly damaged that it'll never be fixed ever again. And the technologies are lost on how to create this thing. And this green Slad here has basically been trying to fix it this whole time, but to absolutely no avail. Now, the Slad is obviously crazy because they've been in here for now, 2,000 years, just trying to fix this thing to no avail. And your players might try and help out with this, but you should definitely tell them, hey, you know, this thing looks like there's nothing in the world you can do for it. Maybe you go ahead and say that there's some pieces that are missing, and definitely be forthcoming with the knowledge that there is no way you can help out this Slad. If they do try and help out the Slad is going to get pissed and bare its fangs and go roar and, you know, try and scare them off. But more often than not, this is going to provoke people into a fight, in which case a fight is going to ensue. Now, green Slad are not nearly as scary as blue Slad. This thing does have some spells on it. It does have Fireball. It does have Invisibility. It can hurl a flame, which is a really weak attack, and it's got these weak claw attacks and bite attacks. So it's not nearly as fearsome as the creature that they just fought previously. But still, this thing can pack quite a punch because fireballs do automatic damage, This thing can fear people away, and this thing can stand in the fight for a bit amount of time because it's got regeneration. The real reason to come here, though, is for the inscription that they need for the Rite of the Arcane Octid. And it's here where they'll find, located in a chunk on the wall, part of the Tower of Divination. And this inscription reads, "Third, a burnt palm loosens the tongue. Shed a secret about yourself for all to hear." Now, how exactly should the Green Slod approach interacting with the rest of the party? I would go ahead and just have it be as standoffish as possible, because the players are going to try and talk to anybody they can in this city. And the more people they talk to, the more they're going to try and get some information out of the city. Maybe the Green Slad will go ahead and just expound one thing at random and say, go away, I'll tell you one thing and go away. And you can just have it as simple as that. In Area 16, we have the Menagerie. When your players arrive here, they'll see that there's this weird park that's in front of them. And it's basically a small-scale version of natural habitats, such as mountains and deserts and forested streams. And they are all now draped in ice, of course. As your players look around, they'll eventually be able to find a device in the center of this place. And this device looks weird. It looks, strange. They'll probably not know what it is. But what's interesting is they'll also see that there is a whole bunch of eggs attached to this thing. If they look around, they can eventually decide to make a DC 15 Arcana check. If they succeed, they understand what this machine is. This machine draws blood from creatures, transports it into these eggs, and there it hatches these weird chimeric creatures. And this is awesome. But the thing is you need to deposit 80 hit points worth of blood. 80 hit points is ginormous. And in fact, I'm pretty sure at 9th level, that would down almost everybody. I can't think of too many people that are going to have that high HP besides those barbarians and fighters and paladins that have high con, I guess. They're going to hear 80 hit points and say, screw that. Now, mind you, it doesn't have to be from an individual person, of course. It could be split amongst the party. If they understand that there is something to be created out of this, maybe they think it'll be worthwhile, and then everybody goes ahead and donates some blood. You get 20 points, you get 20 points. Oh, the barbarian, they get 30 points. Screw that person, right? It could be something along the lines of that. After 80 hit points have been distributed, then after a single minute, then the blood is going to disappear, and the chimeric creation is going to be birthed. And we get this nice little list here of 1d6 creatures. A weasel with glowing eyes, a hare that has a flying speed, a baboon that's got a poison bite, etc., etc. All these things are really unique. And one, I'll tell you, definitely add some more to these should you desire, because I think there's always more fun to be had here. Like, a rat with gills, that's awesome. Go ahead and flip that around. Maybe make a fish with feet. Something interesting, right? It also states here that the Chimeric Crater needs 8 hours to recharge before being used again. I would go ahead and forego that. There really isn't that much need to be a timer on this, because quite frankly, if your party is losing 80 hit points to generate just these, pathetic creatures, in all honesty, they are really weak. They don't have anything too special going on for them. If they spend 80 whole hit points trying to generate this thing, then, props to them, I guess. If they're willing to spend that much time and resources on this, go ahead. Another thing to consider is, what happens if your players fail that Arcana check and they have no idea what this machine is? Do they just say, oh well, we don't know, and just walk away? You could just simply allude to the fact that this thing looks like it has a giant needle that is going to suck the blood out of someone, in which case they might think to themselves, okay, maybe this will hurt just a little bit, and then you can go ahead and have this horrific scene where whoever decides to plug this into themselves, all of a sudden the blood starts rushing out of them. That would be fun. And then, of course, if you go down this route, you have to consider how many points of blood should they lose each turn. Should they lose 20 hit points a turn, 10 hit points a turn, something like that? And the more points that they're losing, they can just sit here and be like, is it worth it? Is it worth it? And then eventually they can go ahead and yank the thing out of their arm and just say, no, I don't care what this is. I don't want to die. You can definitely have that going on. Next up in Area 17, we have the theater. And this is one of the most damning areas, even though it looks pretty innocent. When your players make their way inside, they'll be able to see that this place was clearly a theater of some kind, and if they roam around the place, they can eventually find a whole bunch of scripts for a play. This play, which was called The Blasphemy of Kings, basically was the story of 5 siblings that all expected to claim the throne, and the twist is that they were all dead, which is, kind of on the nose considering the location that this is all taking place in, but whatever. Now, the reason why this is such a detrimental thing to your party is if they pick up any one of these 5 scripts, the Martyrs, the Traitors, the Bewitched, the Haunted, and the Fool's script, and they read them, each of them gives a tremendously bad curse to you. Like, these things are player crippling. We have all attacks against the cursed character have advantage. The cursed character can't perform any action that would directly benefit one of their allies. The cursed character hears an imaginary fey that directs it where to go. All these things are just incredibly bad. So what it states here is you spend an hour reading the script and then bam, you just get cursed after a DC 18 wisdom saving throw. And that's that. It states here that the only way to get rid of these curses is by a remove curse spell or something similar. What I suggest is, I think a fun thing to do here would be to have it where if someone gets cursed, they know that they're cursed, but they feel like if they were to play out the script, then maybe there's a chance that that curse goes away. In which case you can have a fun moment where 5 people pick up these scripts, read them, knowingly get cursed, and decide to play out this play in front of a dead audience. I think that could be a ton of fun. And this is definitely something where you could sit down and write some elaborate play. You could sit down and write, a page worth of dialogue for each player, and they all perform it out. And that would be fun because they would be role-playing their characters, role-playing as these, characters. I think that could be a great time. Another way you can take a look at this is to make it an improv night. Have it where your players have these scripts and you don't know what it is, and you just tell them, hey, you have to play out this script, you have to play it in the span of like 5 to 10 minutes, go. And you can have this fun dialogue between all these characters and them playing up whoever character they are. You can go ahead and just drum up a little name real quick and then just say, oh, the martyr is this person that's willing to do anything, and the traitor is the scumbag, the bewitched is, enchanted. The haunted is, being stalked, and the fool is stupid. And having that play out would be a ton of fun. There is certainly a ton of things you could do with this. And at the end of it all, after your players have played through this, then the curse is lifted and they no longer suffer any of these detrimental effects. That would be an amazing conclusion. And to top it all off, I think something that could be really neat would be to have the ghost of a playwright here heard clapping in the audience. I think that would be a blast. In Area 18, we have the Tower of Necromancy. And this is, of course, one of the towers that they must go to. But what's interesting about this tower, amongst all the other ones, is that this is not a vertical climb. This is a horizontal walkthrough, I guess. But the creepy thing is once your players arrive, there are 200 crawling claws that are tirelessly but ineffectively trying to excavate the ruins here. If your players go ahead and disturb any of this work, 2d6 claws are going to break away from their work and attack the party. At this stage in the game, crawling claws are absolutely worthless, and you probably shouldn't even roll combat for that because that'd be just a waste of time. Just roleplay it out that some claws go up and smack your leg or flip you off, do something comical, and then get back to work. As your players explore around, they'll eventually go into what they find is this place is, of course, littered with a whole bunch of rubble, and they'll find the corpse of Necromancer Catavix, who is lying crushed under some rubble, but his ghost will be sat there, lamenting. His ghost is just going to be sitting there glumly and, sad about all of the things that transpired with the city of Ythryn being destroyed. Your players can go up and talk to this ghost, and the ghost is going to say, hey, I want this place to be good again. Can you go ahead and help me out? So your players are probably going to do this anyway because they need to do it. So your players are probably going to go ahead and start getting to work. In which case we get this little graph here that states that it takes 50 whole man hours divided between everyone to excavate this thing. So this is going to take a tremendous amount of time. If you have a party of 4 adventurers, then they can go ahead and split all of the work here, and that's still going to take a tremendous amount of time. In fact, they wouldn't be digging all day either because, that would just be absolutely tiring. So this is once again feeding into the whole time nature of this campaign, specifically this chapter, and it is going to take a decent amount of time. If your party is a bigger size, and if they also have some NPCs alongside them, then they can go ahead and excavate this place just a little bit quicker. After this 50 man-hours of work, your players can finally find the Necromancer's corpse. And in addition to that, they will also find the inscription right next to him. The corpse has a necklace of fireballs with 6 beads remaining, which is very good, and they will also find the inscription. The inscription here reads, 7th, trace a circle with the ashes of the dead. After the corpse is activated, the ghost is going to go ahead and disperse. Fun story about my game in particular is my fighter saw the necklace of fireballs and he said, "Oh sweet, this is awesome. I'm gonna give one to you and one to you." And I said, "Okay, so as you take the fireball off, you have a fireball in the palm of your hand. What do you want to do?" And that was a blast.